Imagine standing on the wooden deck of a Portuguese caravel in the year 1462, staring into a horizon of complete geographical impossibility. The charts in the captain's cabin promise a sanctuary named Cabo Verde, the Green Cape. Yet, as the vessel draws closer, the eyes are met not with lush emerald forests, sweeping grassy plains, or cascading freshwater streams, but with a towering, violent wilderness of black volcanic rock, sheer cliffs of barren stone, and sun-scorched valleys where the earth itself seems to have perished of thirst. This is the great illusion of the Central Atlantic, a place of deep, unsettling paradoxes, where the name itself feels like a cruel cartographical trick played upon weary travelers of the age of exploration. Why would anyone name an archipelago of rock, dust, and bone the Green Cape? To understand this mystery is to unlock a story of human survival, historical tragedy, and cultural defiance that defies the very laws of physical geography. The 10 main islands of Cape Verde form a dramatic, horseshoe-shaped arc suspended 570 kilometers west of Senegal, isolated from the African mainland by hundreds of kilometers of deep, unforgiving ocean. Physically, this archipelago is not a tropical oasis of swaying palms and gentle rains. It is, in reality, a direct oceanic extension of the hyper-arid semi-desert belt known as the African Sahel. For millions of years, these islands have been locked in a relentless atmospheric battle. Massively powerful trade winds, originating deep within the Sahara Desert, sweep across the Atlantic, carrying millions of tons of fine, golden dust. This Saharan dust blankets the valleys in a permanent, pale brown haze, choking out vegetation, drying up the fragile soil, and blocking the moisture-laden clouds that would otherwise bring life-giving rain. This is a landscape where water is more than a resource. It is a sacred, elusive deity. Only a mere 1/10 of the mountainous land across the entire archipelago is capable of sustaining permanent agriculture. For centuries, the threat of catastrophic drought has hung over these shores like a permanent shadow. When the rains fail, as they have done repeatedly across history, the consequence is not merely a poor harvest, but widespread, devastating famine that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives over generations. Yet, these dry, rocky slopes sit directly in the path of one of the planet's most active and volatile weather corridors. This is the very cradle of storms. It is here, in the warm waters surrounding the archipelago, that many of the tropical depressions and hurricanes that ultimately ravage the Caribbean and North American coastlines begin their atmospheric lives. They gather heat, pressure, and kinetic energy from the ocean surrounding Cape Verde, spinning off into the Atlantic as monstrous engines of destruction. But for the islands themselves, this immense atmospheric energy rarely translates into rain. The clouds tease the towering mountain peaks, wrapping them in thick, tantalizing mists, only to disperse without dropping a single drop of water onto the thirsty valleys below. The geology of the islands is equally severe, forged by the violent tectonic collisions of the mid-Atlantic ridge. These are volcanic peaks rising straight from the ocean floor, some plunging down into oceanic trenches miles deep, others reaching nearly 3,000 meters into the sky. It is a vertical world, where sheer cliffs drop directly into the churning white surf of the Atlantic, creating an imposing barrier that isolated these lands from the rest of humanity for millennia. This isolation meant that prior to the 15th century, no human footprint had ever been pressed into the volcanic soil of Cape Verde. Think about the profound rarity of this geographical fact. In a world where almost every habitable corner of the globe had been traversed, settled, and claimed by indigenous peoples over tens of thousands of years, Cape Verde remained completely empty. It was a blank slate, an uninhabited wilderness of rock and wind, silently waiting in the middle of the ocean. It was not until Portuguese navigators, sailing under the banner of Prince Henry the Navigator, pushed past the known boundaries of the world, that these silent peaks were finally mapped. What they found was a strategic outpost of immense geopolitical value. In the grand chess game of the age of exploration, Cape Verde sat at the absolute center of the world's emerging maritime trade routes. It was the perfect midway point, the indispensable gateway connecting Europe, Africa, and the unmapped horizons of the Americas. Ships crossing the vast ocean stopped here to restock provisions, repair sails, and shelter from violent storms. But how does an empty, waterless rock transform into a thriving nation? How does a landscape of exile and dust become home to one of the most stable, prosperous, and culturally vibrant democracies on the African continent? The answer is not found in the generosity of the land, for the land has never been generous. It is found in the crucible of human resilience, in the unexpected fusion of distant civilizations, and in the indomitable spirit of a people who refused to let the desert dictate their destiny. This island chain did not merely survive its harsh geography, it conquered it, turning the very forces of wind, volcanic fire, and oceanic isolation into the raw materials of an extraordinary global legacy. Today, the world looks at Cape Verde and sees miracles, from the total eradication of ancient, deadly diseases to historic athletic triumphs on the global stage. But every single one of those modern victories was paid for in the currency of centuries of quiet, desperate struggle against an unforgiving environment. Before we descend into the dark, cobblestone valleys of the oldest colonial city in the tropics, and before we unravel the tragic, beautiful birth of the Creole soul, we must ask ourselves, what does it truly take for a society to flourish when the very elements of nature are aligned against its existence? How would you survive in a land where water is gold and the soil is made of fire and dust? If you are ready for this epic journey, drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. Hit the like button, subscribe to Legends of Power, and turn on notifications so you never miss more of our upcoming videos. Join us as we step into the shadows of history and discover how an empty volcanic wilderness became the cradle of a new world. The story of Cape Verde doesn't begin with a discovery, it begins with a collision. To understand the soul of this place, you have to imagine the year 1460. When the Portuguese navigators first dropped anchor in these uninhabited islands, they weren't just charting land, they were drafting a new kind of human experience. Unlike the mainland colonies, Cape Verde was a blank slate, a tabula rasa in the middle of the ocean. There were no indigenous populations to displace. There were only the winds, the volcanic rock, and the immense, crushing silence of the Atlantic. Into this void, the Portuguese brought laborers and enslaved people from the West African coast. And it was here, in the harsh furnace of island survival, that something extraordinary happened. The cultures didn't just sit side by side, they fused. This is the birth of Creole, the Cape Verdean identity. It is a language, a music, and a way of life that is neither purely European nor entirely African. It is the bridge between two worlds that had been violently separated. Think about that for a second. In a world that often demands you pick a side or fit into a box, these islands were the first to prove that you could create something entirely new from the wreckage of the old. When you walk through the streets of Praia today, you aren't just seeing a tourist destination, you are walking through a living, breathing history of human resilience. But this resilience came at a steep price. The early centuries weren't a paradise of cultural exchange. They were defined by the brutal realities of the slave trade. Cape Verde became a massive warehouse, a transshipment point where human beings were held before being sent to the Americas. Every stone in these old colonial fortresses holds a memory of that weight. Yet, look at how the people emerged from that darkness. They didn't just survive, they cultivated a culture of morabeza. Morabeza is more than just hospitality. It's an untranslatable feeling. It's the way a stranger becomes a friend before they've even finished their first drink. It's the way the music, the hauntingly beautiful Morna, turns the deepest sorrow into a melody that makes you want to dance. I've always been fascinated by how societies can take the most painful parts of their history and transform them into such incredible art and warmth. Does your own culture have a word like morabeza, a specific concept that defines how your people treat guests? Or, if you could travel to a place that felt like an entirely new bridge between cultures, where would you go? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. This isn't just history, this is the rhythm of the islands. The Morna music, famously championed by the late, legendary Cesaria Evora, is the soundtrack to this identity. If you listen closely to the lyrics, you aren't just hearing songs about love or loss. You're hearing the literal heartbeat of an island people who spent centuries looking out at an empty horizon, waiting for ships that took away their brothers and sisters, while still finding the strength to keep the fire lit at home. The geography here mirrors the personality of its people, rugged, resilient, and undeniably beautiful. You have islands like Fogo, dominated by a volcano that reminds you daily that life is fleeting, and islands like Sal, where the salt flats shimmer like mirrors reflecting the infinite sky. It makes you realize that being isolated is all about perspective. Is isolation a cage, or is it a laboratory? In Cape Verde, it was clearly the latter. By being cut off from the mainland, they were forced to innovate, to survive, and eventually, to flourish. There is a lesson here for all of us living in our hyper-connected, digital world. Sometimes, the most important work, the most significant personal growth, and the strongest identities aren't formed in the middle of the crowd. They are formed when we are forced to look at ourselves, to reconcile our past, and to build something new from the ground up, just like the first generations of Cape Verdeans did on these volcanic shores. But there is a catch. The very geography that protected this unique culture for centuries is now changing. As the world gets smaller and technology bridges those gaps, the isolation that created this magic is disappearing. The question is, can the Morabeza survive in a modern, globalized world? Before we move into how this island nation is navigating the 21st century, and why some of the most stunning landscapes you'll ever see are actually in danger, take a quick second to hit the like button if you're enjoying this journey so far. It really helps the channel share these hidden corners of the world with more people. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. If the history of Cape Verde is written in its people's resilience, the geography of Cape Verde is written in fire. To truly understand this archipelago, you have to leave the gentle, sandy shores behind and venture into the interior. You have to go where the earth itself is still restless. We are heading to the island of Fogo. The name itself means fire, and it isn't just a metaphor. When you approach Fogo from the sea, you don't see a flat, tropical island. You see a colossal, jagged cone rising 9,000 feet directly out of the Atlantic. It is an intimidating, awe-inspiring monolith that makes you feel incredibly small. Life here is lived on the edge of a geologic knife. The volcano last erupted as recently as 2014, swallowing entire villages in a slow, unstoppable river of molten rock. You'd think that a place so prone to destruction would be abandoned, but you'd be wrong. The people of Fogo didn't just rebuild, they turned the hardened lava into a source of life. They grow grapes in the volcanic ash, producing a wine so rare and distinct that it is sought after by connoisseurs across the globe. It's a perfect metaphor for the Cape Verdean spirit, taking the literal remnants of a catastrophe and using them to cultivate something sweet, something worth savoring. But while Fogo is all about the vertical, let's travel to the complete opposite, the island of Sal. If Fogo is the raw, untamed power of the earth, Sal is the serene, shimmering calm of the sea. Named for its massive, ancient salt flats, this island was once the engine of the archipelago's economy. The salt gathered here was once so valuable, it was called white gold. Today, the salt pans look like an alien landscape, geometric pools of pink and white water that stretch toward the horizon, creating a mirror effect that makes the sky and the ground indistinguishable. Floating in these pools is a rite of passage for every visitor. But more than that, it's a moment of clarity. There is something profoundly meditative about being in a place where the history is quite literally etched into the surface of the earth. You are standing on a landscape that has provided for generations, a landscape that helped put these tiny, remote islands on the map of global trade. Now, pause and think about your own environment. We often view our surroundings, our city, our neighborhood, our home, as just a backdrop for our lives. But these islanders prove that your environment is a partner. It dictates your challenges, it shapes your diet, it influences your art, and ultimately, it defines your legacy. This brings me to a question I really want your take on. If you had to choose a landscape that perfectly matched your personality, what would it be? Are you a Fogo, someone who thrives in the intensity and the challenge of a volcano? Or are you a Sal, someone who finds their strength in calm, reflection, and quiet stability? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to see how you all view your own natural element. The contrast between these islands isn't just a quirk of nature, it's the secret to Cape Verde's survival. Because the archipelago is so fragmented, each island developed its own microculture, its own specific dialect of Creole, and its own way of solving problems. On Santo Antão, for example, the terrain is so impossibly steep and rugged that the farmers developed a system of stone-walled terraces that cling to the mountainsides like something out of a dream. It is a masterpiece of human engineering, built without modern machinery, just sheer grit and thousands of years of ancestral knowledge. Seeing these terraces, you start to understand why the people here are so deeply proud. They didn't just live on these islands, they molded them. They carved the impossible out of the rock. It makes the standard tropical beach vacation feel a bit shallow, doesn't it? When you look at these landscapes, you aren't just seeing scenery, you're seeing the cumulative labor of millions of hours of human effort. Yet, this beauty comes with a fragility that is hard to ignore. Cape Verde is on the front lines of climate change. With rising sea levels and shifting weather patterns, the very islands that were forged by the sea are now being threatened by it. The freshwater sources that have sustained these communities for centuries are becoming scarcer. The delicate balance that the first settlers struck with this volcanic rock is starting to tilt. We are entering a chapter where the story shifts from what was to what will be. The resilience that allowed them to build on volcanoes is now being tested by a global challenge they didn't create. But before we get into the high-stakes future of this Atlantic paradise, I have to ask, do you think we are doing enough to protect the world's most unique, isolated cultures from the side effects of our globalized economy? Hit that like button if you value the preservation of these stories, and let me know your thoughts down below. We've got a lot of ground to cover in the next part of this documentary. We are going to look at the hidden side of Cape Verde that most tourists never see, and how the younger generation is fighting to keep their heritage alive. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on, because the next segment is going to be the most visually stunning part of the entire journey. You cannot understand Cape Verde without understanding its silence. It is not a quiet place. The Atlantic wind is constant, a relentless whistling force that scours the cliffs and bends the trees into permanent, dramatic shapes. But it is in that wind that you find the true heartbeat of the islands. If you walk into a local taberna in Mindelo on a Saturday night, you won't hear the sterile, synthesized beats of a typical tourist resort. You will hear Morna. It's a sound that's hard to categorize. It's soulful, melancholic, and deeply rhythmic. Think of it as the cousin of Portuguese fado, but with a heartbeat borrowed from the African diaspora. It is the sound of saudade, that deep, aching sense of longing for something, or someone, that is far away. For an archipelago that has sent so many of its sons and daughters across the ocean to America and Europe in search of work, Morna isn't just music, it is a lifeline back home. I've met people who haven't stepped foot on their home island in 30 years, yet they weep the moment they hear the first few chords of a classic Morna track. It's a powerful reminder of how identity isn't tied to a piece of dirt, it's tied to a frequency. But it's not all nostalgia. There is a new, vibrant energy surging through the younger generation. They call it Funana. While Morna is the slow, sad reflection of the past, Funana is the explosive, high-energy joy of the present. It's played with an accordion and an iron rod, a tool that was once used for manual labor in the fields. Imagine that, taking a tool of servitude and turning it into an instrument of pure, unadulterated liberation. This is the pattern interrupt of their culture. It's a defiance of the status quo. It says, "You might have tried to define us by our labor, but we are defined by our joy." This brings up a fascinating point about human psychology. We all have things in our lives that represent a struggle, but we also have ways to flip the script and find joy in the middle of it. If you have a specific song, a hobby, or even a tradition that instantly changes your mood when you're having a tough week, I want to hear about it. Drop the name of the song or the activity in the comments. Let's build a positivity playlist for everyone watching this. This ability to transition from the deep, melancholic reflection of Morna to the wild, kinetic energy of Funana is the hallmark of the Cape Verdean personality. It's a psychological flexibility that I think is missing in a lot of modern, high-stress societies. We are often told to be consistent, to have one brand, one persona, But the Cape Verdeans? They are a masterclass in duality. They are the salt of the earth survivors and the poetic dreamers all at once. Consider the role of the padeira, the bread makers, who start their work before the sun rises, working in the heat of the ovens, only to be the first ones laughing and singing in the town square when the sun sets. It's a rhythmic cycle of life that feels almost prehistoric in its simplicity, yet it is profoundly sophisticated. As we explore this further, I want you to notice something in the background of these shots. Look at the people. There is almost no one looking at a screen. In a world where we are constantly tethered to our devices, these islands offer a glimpse of what it looks like to be completely present in your environment. But is this disconnected life sustainable? As the world pushes for high-speed internet, global tourism, and the standardization of culture, the very things that make these islands authentic are being pressurized. There is a massive debate happening on the islands right now between those who want to develop at all costs and those who want to protect the soul of the archipelago. Where do you stand? Do you think isolation is a gift that should be protected, or is it a barrier to progress that should be broken down? Let me know your thoughts. I'm looking for the most thoughtful, unique perspectives to highlight in our next update. Before we move into Chapter 5, where we will uncover the controversial truth about how the outside world is actually changing these islands, make sure you've hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm understand that people still value deep, long-form storytelling. And if you've been waiting for the big reveal about the future of this Atlantic gem, you definitely don't want to miss what's coming next. If you've been following our journey across the Atlantic, you've seen the beauty, the music, and the resilience. But now, we have to look at the other side of the coin. Cape Verde is currently in the middle of a massive transformation, and it comes with a price tag that goes far beyond money. In early 2026, tourism prices across the archipelago saw a sharp increase of over 7%. On the surface, that's just a statistic. But when you look closer, it signals a deeper shift. The islands are moving from a hidden gem to a globally recognized hotspot, with over 1.25 million visitors arriving last year alone. Development is the lifeblood of the nation's economy, accounting for a massive 25% of its GDP. The government is pushing hard to eradicate extreme poverty, and in many ways, it's working. Infrastructure is being overhauled, digital connectivity is spreading, and international investment is at record highs. But as these high-end resorts rise, the old Cape Verde, the quiet, community-driven life we explored in Chapter 2, is being squeezed. There is a growing friction between the blue economy, a sustainable approach to growth, and the pressure for mass-market, high-speed tourism. How do you welcome 1 million guests without losing the very thing they came to find? This is a question I've been wrestling with while filming this. Is it possible for a small, unique culture to grow without being erased? Have you ever visited a place that you loved, only to return years later and feel like it had lost its original charm to overdevelopment? Or do you think tourism is the necessary price to pay for a better quality of life for locals? I want to know your perspective. Leave a comment below. But there is an even bigger, more silent threat looming over these islands: climate change. Cape Verde is a nation on the front lines. They don't have the luxury of debating if climate change is real when the rainy season averages only 10 days a year and the droughts are becoming increasingly severe. The very water that sustains the population is becoming scarcer, and the rising sea levels are threatening the coastal infrastructure that the entire tourism industry depends on. It's a paradox. To fund their future, they need the tourism industry. But to protect their future, they have to survive the environmental impact that global travel contributes to. The government is currently pouring millions into resilient tourism projects, trying to integrate climate-smart technology, renewable energy, and water management. They are trying to build a future where the island isn't just a place to visit, but a model of how a small island nation can survive against the odds. It makes you realize that the story of Cape Verde isn't just a travel documentary. It's a story about the future of all of us. Can we adapt? Can we find balance? We are about to move into the final act of this documentary, the unseen side of the islands. We're going to meet the people who are fighting, on the ground, to save their heritage from these dual pressures of development and climate shifts. But before we get there, if you're finding this perspective on global change thought-provoking, hit that like button. It helps us keep the channel's focus on these deeper, investigative stories. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and turn on those notifications. The final chapter is going to reveal a side of the Cape Verdean spirit you probably haven't seen in any brochure. It's the part of the story that proves that even in the face of impossible odds, human ingenuity finds a way. If you look at a map of the Atlantic, Cape Verde looks like a scattering of pebbles tossed into a vast, deep blue infinity. It's easy to think of these islands as isolated, lonely outposts. But for the people living here, this isn't the edge of the world. It is the center of their universe. In this final chapter, I wanted to go beyond the resorts and the tourist trails. I wanted to meet the guardians, the teachers, the small-scale farmers, and the young entrepreneurs who are refusing to let their culture be swept away by the tide of globalization. I spent a day with a group of young innovators in the city of Mindelo. They aren't trying to reject the modern world, they're trying to hack it. They are using AI-driven agricultural tools to optimize water usage in a climate that gives them almost nothing. They are digitizing the oral histories of their grandparents before the stories fade. They are building a digital archive of the soul to ensure that as the world changes, the essence of Morabeza remains encoded in their future. It is a profound realization. Innovation isn't always about replacing the old with the new. Sometimes, it's about using the new to protect the old. But it's not just about technology. It's about the philosophy of enough. In a world that is obsessed with more growth, more travel, more consumption, the Cape Verdean concept of Saudade and Morabeza acts as a check and balance. They have a deep ancestral understanding that you cannot take more from the island than the island is willing to give. This is something we all struggle with, isn't it? The constant pressure to always have more, do more, and be more. Do you think we could learn something from these islanders about the value of living with enough? If you had to simplify your own life to focus on what truly matters to your soul, what is the first thing you would cut out? I'm genuinely interested in your answers. Let's have a real conversation in the comments. The resilience I've seen here isn't just about surviving a volcano or a drought. It's about the courage to maintain a distinct identity when the rest of the world is pushing for total uniformity. Every time a Cape Verdean teaches a child the complex rhythmic history of their language, or every time they choose to cook a traditional meal instead of reaching for processed, imported convenience, they are performing an act of resistance. They are the guardians of a horizon that is shifting, and yet they remain anchored. We started this journey asking what it means to be isolated in a hyper-connected world. We found that isolation isn't a limitation, it's a laboratory for the human spirit. It creates a space where culture doesn't just survive, it evolves. It forces us to reconcile our past and define our own future. As this documentary comes to a close, I want you to take one last look at these landscapes, not just as a destination for your next trip, but as a mirror for your own life. We are all living on our own islands, navigating our own storms, and searching for our own version of Morabeza. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the soul of Cape Verde, I want to ask one final favor. Please share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the world is still full of incredible, resilient, and deeply human stories. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. We have a whole series of unseen global stories coming up, and you're not going to want to miss the next one. And finally, leave me with one word, just one, that describes how you feel after watching this journey. Does it make you want to travel? Does it make you want to reflect? Or does it make you want to protect the places you love? I'll be in the comments section for the next hour, answering your questions and seeing what you all have to say. Thank you for being part of this journey. This wasn't just a documentary about an island, it was a conversation about us. See you in the next one.